Again, let me see a survey. How many? Or it's like you really don't know much about it. You've heard maybe some of these terms, but as far as knowing much about the burial shroud of Jesus, the cloth that covered him, you're like, no. All right, well, that's good, because that's my purpose tonight. I'm new at this, by the way. Years ago, I just passed it off as, probably some forgery relic out there that, because in the Middle Ages, anybody here from a Roman Catholic background? So Roman Catholicism for a long time would elevate certain relics from the Christian faith, meaning they would have certain things in their churches. They're called relics. Maybe this claims to be a part of a cross of Jesus, or whatever it might be. And so some people just pass this off, the shroud, as, is that something from the Middle Ages that really is just not authentic? And the answer is no. As you're going to see, it's amazing that more people don't know about it. And hopefully through discussions and through this, I've got some books that we're going to be adding to the library, that all of us can become more knowledgeable, because I'm way behind on my understanding of it too. So I'm kind of just letting you in a little bit of how I understand it. And then my prayer and hope would be maybe next year we have somebody who really knows the stuff, and I can mention some names that could come into a small conference. So very reasonable. So we would, if the church is interested. So tonight, if you're like, I'm interested in getting somebody who's written 800-page books, or this one is 300 pages by a lawyer in St. Louis, Test the Shroud, Mark Antonacci. This one is 500 pages. And he is willing to travel. So getting somebody like him to come and speak, I think that's where I would like to go. So I'll just do a brief overview tonight. And why don't we begin in prayer? Lord, we give you thanks once again that we get to meet as believers tonight and to think about the resurrection and the image that was left on the burial cloth, and help us to understand this so we can be more knowledgeable to discuss it with those around us. And Lord, tonight we're confessing we believe in the resurrection, not because of the cloth, but because of the eyewitness testimonies, because of your word. And but yet help us to understand this possible greatest artifact that we can think of or ever discover. Thank you for each one that's here tonight. We ask your blessings on everything that's said and done. In Christ's name, amen. So let me just start. If this thing comes out to be for sure a fake next year, okay, I'll just announce, hey guys, it's a fake, we can move on, right? Because I don't believe in the resurrection because of the burial cloth of Jesus. I believe in the resurrection because the eyewitness accounts that are found in Scripture. And we'll talk about that at another time, about the resurrection. Okay, so these are some of the names over the years. Tonight you're going to find out, why is it called the Shroud of Turin? Because it's been housed in Italy, Turin, Italy, for over 450 years. So that's why right now it's called the Shroud of Turin. I'm just simply going to call it the burial cloth of Jesus. I'll probably use some of these terms interchangeably. And I want to take a look at some of the scriptures. All four Gospels mention a linen cloth, shroud, cloth, etc. So I want to start with Matthew 27, verse 57. Because, by the way, I didn't have a long enough cord to reach all the way down there. So I don't have my computer up here, which is a little weird. So I'm going to be reading up here with you guys. So Matthew 27, when it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who himself also became a disciple of Jesus. This man went to Pilate, asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate ordered it to be given to him. Joseph took the body, wrapped it in a clean linen cloth, laid it in his own new tomb, which he had hewn out of the rock. He rolled a large stone against the entrance of the tomb and went away. So Matthew's gospel clearly has the body being wrapped in a clean linen cloth. Mark's gospel, it's interesting that it says that Joseph bought a linen cloth, took him down, wrapped him in the linen cloth, and laid him in a tomb. When you read the accounts, what you have is you have Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, and some say possibly John, who take the body from the cross, put a head covering, right, covering his face, take him to the tomb, and lay out this cloth that we're going to be talking about. But everybody's on the same page right now that Joseph bought a linen cloth and he wrapped him in it. So Matthew's gospel mentions it, Mark's gospel mentions it. And Israel's at a crossroad of all kinds of trade. Now, when we were in Jerusalem, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff you can buy. Same way in the first century. I mean, it was, if you look on a map, and I should have had a map here up here, if you look at where Israel's located, they had all kinds of goods coming in and out of Israel. And so, I'm not going to get into the background of linen. It is flax, by the way. But Joseph, wherever he bought it, does it matter? No, but it is interesting that in different countries, like in Egypt, they have certain weavings that they use in Egypt. So there are whole people, I mean, this is a whole study. Like, there are specialists that just study, like, cloths. And so maybe one Sunday night, maybe in the future, if you're interested, we could talk about the different cloths of this time period. And so I'm not going to go in deep on the different types of cloth in the first century. Not tonight. Luke's gospel also talks about Joseph of Arimathea taking the body down, wrapping it in a linen cloth. John's gospel, what's interesting is, let me skip on down here, verse 40. So they took the body of Jesus, bound it in linen wrappings with spices, and then when John and Peter go to the tomb, they enter the tomb, and notice this, they saw the linen wrappings lying there, but they didn't go in. They stooped and looked in. John did. Peter came and followed him and entered the tomb, and he saw the linen wrappings, plural, lying there, and the face cloth, the sudarion, which had been on his head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. So all four Gospels mention Jesus being wrapped in a cloth. John's Gospel mentions a head covering. That would be a whole other topic on a Sunday night. There's the sudarium is in Spain right now, and I don't have time to talk about it tonight. Okay? It has some of the same qualities like blood, pollens, etc., and can be traced back in history. So, not going to talk about that either. So, there are two things that we're dealing with, and I'll show you a picture here in a second. So, of course, this is a dumb model that I made, just to give you an illustration, because I couldn't find any. And I'm going to have to clean it up because my granddaughters use these Barbie dolls. This is probably Ken or somebody, you know. But he's got a beard, all right? I'm just saying, I didn't have anything else to go on because people are having a hard time conceptualizing what are we talking about here. And so the head cloth is something separate. What we're talking about tonight is the cloth that covered Jesus and the image that was put on the cloth, both on the top and of the bottom, that we're going to see in more detail. Okay? There's not an image on the cloth, the head cloth. It's only on this cloth. This cloth is laying separate from the wrappings that wrapped his body. This was just used when they took him down from the tomb. They would actually, if you've ever talked to, well, I'm not going to get into gory details of death is terrible, right? Rigor mortis, mouth open, eyes. The thought is that they would cover the face for the dignity of the dead person. And they would put a linen, they would put the cloth on and then take another cloth and wrap it. So in this diagram, then they would take another cloth, linen strip, probably about 3 inches wide, and wrap the body. By the way, this is how Orthodox Jews are buried today. I told Pam I would like to be buried this way. I have no problem. The night I discussed different ways to be buried, right? We talked about cremation, embalming, caskets, all of that. Would it be legitimate if they open up somewhere in Iowa? I think there's a couple of green burial places. To just be wrapped in a cloth and put it in the ground? Yeah, nothing wrong with that, right? That's how Jews did it for centuries. It's how many Orthodox Jews do it today. A quick burial, just simple cloth. So this is a picture in Turin, Italy. And I have been in contact with the guy who created all these pictures, Barrie Schwortz. So it's been in Turin, Italy for 445 years. Before that, it was in France. Before that, it was in Constantinople. Before that, it was in Edessa. Okay? So mainly we're talking about if we just found this cloth, that's where I want to take it from. I'm not going to get into where it's been. That's a fascinating history in and of itself. It would take many nights to discuss it. So there are a lot of books that you can read. I've got another book that deals with the history. Tonight I want to pretend that we just found it. Because really that's important. How did we get the image on the cloth? What are the qualities of this cloth? So if I went back and showed you the history, we really wouldn't be where I want to be tonight. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview. This thing is 14 feet, roughly 3 inches long. 14 feet. So when people ask me, I say it's 14 by 3.5. 14 feet long, 3.5 wide. 3 inches, 3 feet, 7 inches. Now, as you can see from this, you can picture now that model. Was that worth seeing? Where they would lay the body onto the cloth and then wrap it over the head and cover the whole body. So what you see here is the front image, and this is the back side. Now you really can't see much of an image. Would you agree? There's blood on the image, on the arms, on the head, on the back, etc. There's blood on the cloth. But that image is pretty faint. Because it's only, so I'll get into that. So the big question tonight is, how did an image of a man get on a cloth? I'll explain. Some people were looking at what I have down here and were asking about these areas right here. And in 1532, in France, they had a fire, probably arsonist. And it was kept in a wooden box, decorated with all kinds of silver. And the fire got so hot that this thing is, imagine, 14 feet long. I do have a 14-foot cloth linen that's about 3 foot wide that if you remember last year, I had folded up right over here. So I should have had that out tonight as an example of what that would be. So it's folded up and it's put in this box. And when the fire happened, the silver melted and burned down through the layers, creating the same burn pattern. Okay? Think about hot metal. What, 800 degrees, whatever it is? Melting straight through. They doused it with water, which you can still see also water stains. So these are burn marks. All these are burn marks. Now these burn marks are probably from incense. How many of you grew up Catholic where they did the incense? Rick was probably an altar boy that filled the incense thing, right? Okay, there was somebody else in church. They said, oh yeah, I was the person that filled the... Have you ever been to a Catholic funeral where they take the thing of incense and wave it? Possibly these holes, which predate this, probably because we have drawings and paintings, I'll show you in a second, about these. So these are separate. So this is from the fire of 1532. So in Turin, in 1898, they were going to get out the shroud and have a public showing. And they had a lawyer who was an amateur photographer. So photography came about in the 1800s. And he was an amateur photographer, and he was asked to come and take pictures. Let me show it to you here. So when he took a picture of the shroud, that's what he was taking a picture of. When he got back, Pam and I used to have a darkroom. I used to have a darkroom in our house. Pam didn't actually do the darkroom stuff, but we had our kids come down, and you've seen it done, right? So you take pictures, the negative, and then you have 3 baths of chemicals. And as you take this paper, you are developing the image, and the image is all of a sudden coming clear. Now his was a glass plate. He almost dropped the glass plate because he couldn't believe the image that he saw. So what you have here is a negative, right? This is the negative that he saw, which is far clearer of an image than what's up here. Get out some of your, anybody still have negative film? I should have brought some tonight. Just to give you an example of what the negative image is like versus the positive image. So this is the first photograph of the shroud. Right here. Secunda Pia is his name. Secunda Pia. And a lot of people thought, well, surely this is a fake. Sure, there's no way this is a real image of a man because of the 3D qualities. If you zoomed in, if you came down and looked at it down here and looked at the face, you know that a body made that image, right? This is 3D quality. And then in 1931, another photographer got permission to go take photographs of it and came up with the same image. And so there have been many photographers now, and I'll get into that. But after this event really started the study of the Shroud of Turin. Because they couldn't how was this image made? So Barrie Schwortz, I've actually been emailing with him. In 1978, he was asked to go with other scientists and go to Turin in 1978 and take pictures. And he's standing by a Secunda Pia's original camera. So Barrie has his camera down here. And this was the big, I forgot how big these glass plates were. I had the dimensions. I don't know if I have it on my computer, but in my notes. But this is the original camera that Secunda Pia used. That's pretty cool. So, with this face, some scientists, you've heard of Los Alamos Lab, and these scientists from Colorado worked for, I think, Air Force Academy. They were physicists, etc. When you look into all the people that went to Turin, Italy in 1978, that's what I want to mainly talk about tonight. So if you get online, so if you look on your sheet, I've got a lot of websites. And so basically tonight is to just give you a little bit of an introduction and then give you websites. And I will, if I have your email, I'll have a hyperlink, so all you got to do is click on these so you don't even have to enter in the information. Would that be helpful? So in the email, you could just go and click on these. So I have YouTube, just some suggestions, and I can send you more, where you can watch real experts talk about all this stuff. Okay? The best website is from this man right here. So he started a website called Shroud.com. So if you look at your Shroud resource handout, Barrie Schwortz, editor of Shroud.com. It's the largest Shroud website out there. The last I looked, like 13 million views. It has tons of articles. You can look at all the photographs that he took. Okay? And also, I think he has some links to books and videos and conferences, etc. Let me point out some things on this black and white. If you come down afterwards and look at it, you can see these even clearer. These are nail prints. That's where these are blood. This is blood on the forearms. This is where the nail would have gone through the wrist right here and would have come out right here. And so this is the blood marks on the wrist here. Also the side wound, blood on the scalp, all over the head, front and back. Lacerations all over the back side of the individual, which you'll be able to see better. These are watermarks from the 1532 fire. So they doused it with water. So you have watermarks on there. You've got the scorch marks, but you clearly have an individual underneath that cloth that made that image. So the question tonight is, how did that happen? How did that happen? How did the image get on the cloth? What started scientists wanting to study it is in 1976, some scientists in the United States had what's called a VP8 analyzer. And they ran an image through the scanner, and they were shocked because it's a 3D image. How was it made? There's a body that made this. How did that happen? If it's been in Turin, Italy, close to 500 years. What kind of technology would they have to somehow get an image that is barely seen on this cloth and has 3D characteristics and has blood in all the right spots? And by the way, the blood was on there before the image. So if it's a fake, I mean, in the back of Mark Antoncini's book, he has, if it's a forgery, they would have to do this, and he just lists a whole bunch of things. Like it's impossible that this is a forgery. And so probably if I were you, I would get one of his books if you really want to study it. And he goes into a ton of great things. So that's what started this group called STURP. And I've been, by the way, it's been fun. I've been, I don't know why you can't see that. That was an email that I emailed one of these guys. This guy, photo reliefs. And so the VP8 analyzer showed that this is a 3D image. A body made this. And so some other people have done research and come up with the same conclusion. So this is what really got their attention. In the book I have, which is, it's an older book, but it's really good, by Ian Wilson, called The Shroud, he says the VP8 image analyzer's inventor, Peter Schumacher, who personally delivered the machine to Jackson and his team, has recalled his similar emotions on seeing the Shroud's full-body image on his system's TV monitor for the very first time. A true three-dimensional image appeared on the monitor. The nose ramped in relief. The facial features were contoured properly. But wait, it's just an image, a flat image. How in the world does it have 3D properties? How do you do that? How do you do an image that it looks like it's a negative image? Does it not look like a negative image when you look at it? How does a person create that? So they started the Shroud Research Project. And so whenever you're reading something that says STURP, that's what it stands for. And when you do look down at all the credentials, these guys started, Jackson and Jumper started this project and got all these scientists, 25 plus scientists, with all these different backgrounds from very prestigious places, Lockheed. So this person specialized when he went over there in infrared whatever, okay? Technical support, etc., chemistry, image analysis, X-ray radiology, and X-ray fluorescence. It's kind of interesting. All these different backgrounds, and there's more. I just wanted to give you a little sampling, okay? What they did, it goes on and on, loaded up 70 crates and went to Turin, Italy in 1978. Tons of equipment. Over $3 million worth of equipment. And unloaded it, and their stuff was held up because they had X-ray stuff, and the airport held it up for 5 days, and so their time was shortened on setting everything up. But they got 5 days, 120 hours roughly, to spend with the Shroud. And here's some of their pictures. All these pictures are by Barrie Schwortz that I'm showing you, so I want to give him credit. So they were able to go in and spend time with this cloth, and they made special tables and with all this equipment. And here they are for the first time looking at the cloth, and they get out all their equipment. They're analyzing the whole cloth, checking it out. I mean, I have no idea what kind of instruments they're using. I'm sure you could, find out if you want. But pretty impressive stuff, isn't it? And then they came back with all this information and wrote peer-reviewed articles and scientific journals, etc. And you can find all of this stuff on shroud.com. Literally, you can find all of these technical articles, and some of them are written in layman terms that you can understand them, and they divulge all their research. There's Barrie right there. So his camera setting up on the slide rail in which he could, and by the way, this is all gridded so they can tell, like when they take a sample here, they can tell what section it's in. And so while it's on this table, he takes his camera and is going through taking different types of pictures. And then they would turn off all the lights and do ultraviolet pictures. And then they would turn off all the lights and put lights behind the cloth to shine lights through to see what they... So a lot of different ways to analyze the cloth. Let me move in a little bit closer. I mean, some people have commented the fingers look really long for a man. The man in the shroud was 5'10", about 170 pounds. So when you look at the image, you think, okay, here's a man who's been crucified. So in one of these books, talk about the 25 different medical examiners that have spent time investigating with good images what all this person went through. And what do you find out? Well, the person had a crown of thorns. There's blood on the head. He has blood on his wrist where the nails went through. And the angle of the blood dripping, okay, so if a man's being crucified, the angle of the blood dripping fits with crucifixion. You have a speared side with blood on the cloth, front and back of a watery, bloody substance. The blood itself, when tested, has like serum in it, and they go into all the detail of bilirubin present in the blood and some technical words. I have no idea what they're talking about the proteins and what happens to blood under stress. Your body gives out, your liver starts producing. Ruth is a nurse, she could probably tell us. But anyway, if you want to read about it, there are plenty of articles to dive in about just the blood, right? Then you have radiologists saying, this is almost like an x-ray. It has x-ray qualities. Because these fingers are not just showing, my fingers here, but the bone actually, I'll use Pam's hand for example, is actually much longer, right? That's what it looks like on the shroud. And so there's so many weird things like that. Well, like, how was that image made like that? Way before the technology. So if you're looking at, by the way, you can go through and look at all these pictures online, okay? So this is a watermark from the dousing of the fire in that 1532 fire. Then if you get online and you look, there's different types of photography to highlight, like in this picture, the blood marks or the scourging marks. And I don't have it with me, but I have a sample of what they believe. The soldiers, two soldiers, one was taller than the other, with a whip, leather whip, a flagrum, that had 2 lead balls. And they know the exact dimensions of these balls. So and I'll talk about it this Sunday, when they scourge the person, there's over 130 scourge marks. These are blood marks, whelps, of the flagrum hitting the back and hitting the legs, right, etc. So they can count all of that. I mean, they can go through and look at every single mark. Now, if you look at it, I mean, think about the image here. So when they go in on computer systems, they're like, they can even tell what size of reed he was hit with in his face. So if we're reading about they spit and beat him, another text says they took a rod and they whacked him in the face with it. They can actually tell you the diameter of the rod. They can tell you that on his right cheek was way more swollen than his. I mean, we've got somebody whose face is pummeled. So we've got all this different kind of. This person endured trauma. So these are all the blood. That's the side and the wound in the side there. And of course, you can look at all this online on some of the references. I think this is a fluorescent picture which highlights. You can see right here. This is dark. That's where this is a flagrum type that has 2 heavy lead balls, probably lead, that when they would whack the back of an individual, and you're like, how do they know one was taller? It's because the angle of the wound, one standing here giving the blows, and the other one standing there, and the angle of the blows, they could tell that one was even taller than the other. So, I mean, pretty interesting stuff if you want to dive further in it. So if you notice, like on the table here, the way that it's gridded, online, you can go in. This one is from Vernon Miller. It's called shroudphotos.com. It's on there. And seriously, go check it out. You can go in and you can zoom in on these areas. So the backside of his legs were all scourged. His whole back is scourged. His arms don't have as much scourging because what they would do is they would tie the victim, their hands up like this, and that's when they would receive the scourging. And if you remember, Pilate thought that if I scourge him almost to the point of death, maybe the Jewish leaders would be satisfied and let him go, but that wasn't enough. So then he goes on to have him crucified. And we know the pierced side was after they saw that they broke, if you remember, there were 2 criminals crucified. And when they came to Jesus, he was already dead, but to make sure, they took the spear and stuck it in his side. The other 2 men had their legs broken. Jesus did not. Are you wondering what this is? Possibly a Jewish ponytail. Meaning the man in the picture had a beard, and like if you look at Barrie Schwortz today, he has this ponytail, and sure enough, there were Jews, religious Jews, who had longer hair than the Romans, and a beard, and these are all the scourge marks on the backside. Here's a close-up of the linen. Linen is flax, made out of flax. And they tell you it's herringbone weave, etc. That's the pattern here. And the image is on there. So if you were to go to Turin, Italy, by the way, it's better to see the images online than it would be if you could pay for a ticket and go over there and see the image on the wall. You'd have to stand back about 10 feet, about where you guys are, to even see the image. When you're up close, you're like, I don't see any image. Because that's how fine of image it is. And wait till you hear how fine of image it is. Remember, it's 3D. So this is blood. So blood's still right on there. And there's some theories of why is it still red? Because if you have blood on a shirt or something and it's a couple months old, what color is it? Brown or black, depending on how long. Well, how come it's red? A few theories is if it has enough bilirubin and some other kind of chemical of a body under stress. Some theory, and you can read articles on this, stays red, more red, makes it more red, brighter red. This guy and some others believe in the radiation that created the image preserves the blood. Into that. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. I'm getting ahead of myself. But if you want to read about that, I mean, you could read. That's why you could do a whole evening just on, let's talk about the blood on the cloth. What can we know about the blood on the cloth? It's AB, blood. Not enough to get a full DNA panel, but they do know that 18% of Jews have AB blood, etc. I mean, so you can read a lot about the blood, all right? Now, here's one of these. All right, so the herringbone weave. So let's just take one of those. Let me go back here. This is a better picture. So that's a thread. How many do the warp and woof of like a linen or a cloth? You know what I'm talking about? So as this is going in and out. So if you were to pull one of these threads out, okay, very fine thread, made up of about 150 to 200 fibrils, and these fibrils are thinner than my beard hair or your hair. That's how fine the fibril is. So this linen thread is made up of about 150 to 200 fibrils. The image is only on the top few fibrils, and this is the amazing thing. This is why, I'll get to the conclusion in a second by how incredible this image really is. So here's a diagram of, let's say if you could cut the fiber into, and this is a cross section. What we're talking about is the image is only on the top fibril. Few fibrils okay, so one of those threads, and it's 360 around that small, thinner than hair fibril. Would everybody admit there's nobody that can, so this thing does not have paint, does not have dye, does not have any chemicals. Then what made this image? And how is it that it's all the way around the individual fibril? It doesn't soak through to any of the other fibrils. Whatever made the image encodes somehow changing. How many know we're all made of atoms, right? It was an atom event, right? This is a radiation event from the body that's emanating from the head to the feet, out, front and back, putting the image on the cloth. That's the theory that I hold to by reading these books and watching tons of videos. That the power of the resurrection, so what kind of energy can make that? Less than 1 second, so they calculate this. A burst of energy, less than a second, which we call resurrection, but they can't say that, right? They can just say, right, radiation caused this image. What caused the radiation? We have no other cloth in history. No other cloth in history has an image that's like this. Leave a body in a shroud as long as you want. You're not getting an image like this. We have tons of bodies in shrouds, no images. There's no decomposition. When does decomposition set in? It's put in a cooler rock tomb. Decomposition has not set in yet. After about, 3 days? What's going to start happening? No decomposition on the cloth. As a matter of fact, you still have rigor mortis. How do they know that? Because of the image on the cloth. If you're laying on a cloth, what's going to happen to us? If you and I were to lay on a cloth, what kind of image are you going to have in certain spots? It's going to be flat. Not with rigor mortis sitting in. And yet, it's not long enough to have decomposition. And isn't it interesting? I mean, you start adding all of this up. You can't make that image. Today, we still couldn't make this full body image with all these characteristics. So, these fire holes are interesting. These little L shape here, so it's folded up, and these predate the 1532 holes. How do we know this? Because a Hungarian Prey Codex, dated 1191, is now in a national library in Hungary, Budapest, Hungary. And in this codex, this ancient book, we have Jesus being wrapped up in a cloth, and when you zoom in, the same L-shaped burn holes. Doesn't this look like the herringbone weave as the painter is painting this person? Thumbs folded in. Remember the image? You don't see thumbs. That's interesting. You didn't see the thumbs on the image. What's the theory there? A couple theories on that is when the nail goes in, the spike goes in, it's hitting nerves that would... Jim Vroom has a condition that made one of his fingers bend completely down. Is that right, Jim? And you had to have a surgery, and it's genetic, to let that finger go out. The theory is, some people have the theory, is that the spike goes in and hit a nerve that causes the thumb to fold in. And another theory is, funeral, what do you call those, morticians, do it today, is, at least they did at one time, when they have the people's hands in the caskets, will tie the thumbs together. That you can't see it, but the thumbs are tied together. Anyway, my point is, in the photos and the pictures on the cloth, you can't see the thumbs. So same way in this painting. So what was the painter seeing? And this would be a whole nother night. How does this image show up in history, on church walls, on coins? Are there coins that have the image of this man on the coins? And the answer is yes. In the monastery in Egypt, Mount Sinai monastery, guess what? We have a picture of Jesus that many people believe was painted off of the shroud, because there's too many areas of congruence, right? So too many areas that are identical. So my point is on this, if somebody was looking at this image, or a painting of this image of the man on the shroud, and the point is, too, is that it has the same burn holes. So what's that tell us about the dating of the cloth? You can start tracing it back. Okay, we know, that somebody was seeing this in 1192. And then we have other writings in France. We have other writings in Constantinople. So if you were to do a whole interesting study, the fascinating thing is tracing its history. So shroud.com, like I said, is the best website. I just looked at it the other day, and 13 million visitors. And when you go on there, you can read all of these articles, but this is what I want to point out. What's the summary of the Shroud of Turin research project? What's their summary? Anybody want to see it? After they did all of that, they came out with a summary of their findings. Here it is. Summary of STURP's conclusion Conclusions was written by John Heller in non-technical language and distributed at the press conference held at the STURP's, after STURP's final meeting in October of 1981. No pigments, paints, dyes, or stains have been found on the fibrils. X-ray, fluorescence, microchemistry on the fibrils preclude the possibility of paint being used as a method for creating the image. So this is pretty interesting, right? Ultraviolet and infrared evaluation confirm these studies. Computer image enhancement and analysis by a device known as a VP8 image analyzer show that the image has unique three-dimensional information encoded on it. Microchemical evaluation has indicated no evidence of any spices, oils, biochemicals known to produce by the body in life or death that could make an image like this. It's clear that there has been a direct contact of the shroud with the body, which explains certain features such as scourge marks as well as dried blood. However, while this type of contact might explain some of the features of the torso, it is totally incapable of explaining the image of the face with high resolution that has been amply demonstrated by photography. We can conclude for now that the shroud image is that of a real human form of a scourged, crucified man. It is not the product of an artist. That's what I like to call it. An image not made by hands. You could put that as a title now for this image. An image not made by hands. That's their conclusion. The blood stains are composed of hemoglobin and also give a positive test for serum albumin. Am I saying that right, Ruth? I have no idea what it is. Don't tell me right now. The image is an ongoing mystery until further chemical studies are made, perhaps by this group of scientists or perhaps by scientists in the future. The problem remains unsolved. They could tell you what didn't create it. Then what in the world created it? So, now let's move to carbon dating. So in this book, The Resurrection of the Shroud, so what happened in 1998? They tested part of the corner of the shroud, an 1.5 inch piece, and sent it off to laboratories. Okay? And it tested to be, I hate to tell you the bad news, 1200s. 1260 to 1390. So we can all go home. Not so fast. Not so fast. That's what stopped a lot of people caring about the shroud. All major papers, magazines, it's a fake. Why? It's a medieval cloth. Well, you can read this 800-page book, 1988, C14 dating of the Shroud of Turin. He tells you why they didn't follow the right protocols. They took it from the worst place, a corner. So when it was held in churches thousands of times, guess where they held it? They held it in the corner. Guess where they took the sample? In the corner. Guess what they were supposed to do? Take it from different places on the shroud. So they use the same 1.5 inch piece, and then they cut it into strips, and they send it off to the different labs. Now, in Mark Antoncini's book, this is what he says. Errors in radiocarbon dating have been quite numerous. Just a few notable mistakes are dating of living snail shells to be 26,000 years old. Dating a year-old leaves as 400 years old. Dating a Viking horn to the future year of 2006. Okay, things like that. And he said, I could give you many more, but you get the point, right? He says, on in the book also, they get into, okay, so here's the theory on what made the image. Radiation made the image. Okay? Either neutron, proton, some type of burst of radiation put the image on that. That's the only explanation. Okay? Well, who caused that? Right? Okay, well, we have an outside source that tells us. So they can only come so far. You can only come so far. And what I like about the investigation about nuclear science is it tells us a little bit about the carbon dating flaw. And this is where I would like to go. So some people say, well, the corner had been reweaved because the burn spots have had patches by nuns in the 1500s. And so if this area of the cloth wore out, they probably just put a new piece in, which is going to date differently. So some people say that's the problem. It needs to be retested in these other places because they didn't follow the proper protocol. Well, a nuclear engineer, Bob Rucker, and others are saying we want a retest, Test the Shroud book. This is the best book to get. They say we need to test the cloth again with more of the newer testing capabilities that we have to test it for nuclear activity, radiation activity, etc. So in this book, Mark and nuclear engineers have said this, the same process, so this radiation burst could also form new created C14 from nitrogen. This newly created C14 would make the shroud appear much younger than it actually is. When asked by a journalist if such a process could have caused the incorrect dating of the shroud in 1988, Michael Tite, who coordinated the carbon dating of the shroud for the British Museum, commented, "It is certainly possible if one gave the shroud a large dose of neutrons to produce C14 from the nitrogen in the linen cloth." That's interesting. That was said. So he was a part of the original team when they sent the samples off. He's saying, you know what could change it? A neutron absorption. So neutron, right? So the radiation moment, that would change everything. And he confessed that. Another scientist proved that by radiocarbon dating a 3,400 BC Egyptian linen cloth before and after irradiating it with neutrons in the quantity first suggested by Phillips, the radiocarbon dating before neutron irradiation was in agreement with the mummy's cloth's known historical age, but after irradiation, its age was shifted 46,000 years toward the future. 500 centuries forward in time. That's very interesting, and you can have the footnote here, and you can go read all these articles yourself. How many would say that's very interesting? So have they come back and let the world know about this kind of stuff? And the answer is no. That's why you have to do the reading yourself. By the way, this is if they get a chance to retest it, how many? And so they've written letters to the Pope because it had been in the Savoy family for hundreds of years. So it was given to the Pope in 1985, and it has to be housed in Turin forever. Okay? So the Savoy family had held it for hundreds of years. And so right now letters have been written to the Pope saying, would you give us access? So I can't get into the history of who's owned it, but that's fascinating. So samples were irradiated with neutrons and then heated. All 6 cloth samples were then dated to a period between 1,120 to 1,390 years younger than their ascribed historical dates. That's chapter 8, page 164. So I wouldn't jump to they proved it a forgery because of the dating. No. So you have all this other evidence. And so if you talk to your friends about it, they said, oh, they proved that wrong by carbon dating. Just you need to know the other side of the story. So if you want to read about this more, there's a lot of stuff on it. Let me, this guy I have on your sheet, Bob Rucker, I've emailed with him, talked to him. You know what he did for a living? He's a nuclear engineer. So his job was to run computer diagrams on radiation and nuclear power plants, etc. And so he has a lot of good, so it's called shroudresearch.net. So his theory is the mass of the body, when that radiation event happened, when that resurrection event happened, you're going to have different dates on, and so he has a diagram. You're going to have different dates depending on how many neutrons were given off in that area. So they can calculate, take an average person, I'm 5'10", I'm way over 170, by the way, just to let you know. But they can calculate, okay, this person on the Shroud was 5'10", about 170 pounds. How many neutrons are in my body right now? So if it happened to me, they know what kind of neutron discharge I would have. Then they can actually map out how far would it push into the future, the dating, if it's way down here by the feet. Are you following me? So if you look at one of Bob Rucker's, this is solving the carbon dating problem. So what happens is when this radiation burst, it actually changes the nitrogen-14 and throws off another atom or whatever it is, and it creates new C14 fibers, or new C14 in the fibers. That's why you get different. So what they do in dating carbon-14, right? And what they're saying is radiation changes everything. It adds more carbon-14 to the cloth, or whatever you're testing. So if you want to do more reading on that, I emailed him the other day and he explained it again. I'm like, can you explain this again? Neutrons shifted the carbon date for the corner of the Shroud from 33 AD to about 1325 by neutron absorption producing C14 atoms on the cloth, which would shift the carbon date. And so, well, okay, can we test it? Yeah, they've already tested it, and that's what happened. So it's been tested and proven that this is what happens. So he has a lot of that in this book. So, all right, I'm running out of time. Let me fast forward. Another thing that I want to study, which is interesting. Did you see them with tape on the cloth? Taking tape on the cloth? Pollens are found all over the cloth. Pollens from, you guessed it, Jerusalem. And from plants that are only found in Jerusalem. They're not found, so Randy and Sue, you might be interested in this. I mean, there's tons of articles just on botany. So just on the pollen that's found on the cloth. 42 grow in Jerusalem, where the cloth it had to have been in Jerusalem. It had to be in Edessa. It had to be in Constantinople, because they find pollens on the cloth, but most of the pollens come from there in Israel. Also another interesting is they identified 28 species represented in flower images that are on the Shroud. And once again, there are flowers that are only found in Israel, and they're flowers that only bloom in March and April, and they only open between, let's say, 12 o'clock and dusk. And they were cut, so they had to be cut. So if it's a forgery, you got a forger who back then in the 1200s had knowledge of pollen, and let's go get pollens from Israel, no. And what forger could put an image on the fibrils? It can't be done. So this is interesting as well. So I'm just barely touching, as we wrap up, barely touching it. Limestone residue found on the knees. How many of you know you have Indiana limestone, Missouri limestone, Wyoming limestone? Jerusalem has a limestone, and they can test it chemically. And so find particles of limestone on the nose, on the bottom of the feet, and the knees. What do you mean nose? He hit the ground hard, evidently, because there's limestone residue in those places. As he's carrying the cross member of the cross, he falls, and then they give the cross member to Simon of Cyrene. So the whole issue of limestone residue is something that needs to be studied further. X-ray-like images, the bones in the hands showing the teeth while the lips are closed. So as radiologists look at the image, and those are bones in there. It's not just, my fingers are only this long. I'm 5'10", right? About the size of Jesus, by the way, and I do have a beard, but I'll go on. What I'm saying is, these fingers are long. Why? Because it's radiation coming out of the body creating that. I should have had how many have seen the pictures I put on Facebook of Pam's X-ray? Is X-ray incredible? She goes down there, and this machine here, you can't see the radiation waves. But these rays are going, and they're creating an image on the plate, and it's showing up her arm and then the bones in there. Well, that's the same kind of properties that we see with the man in the shroud. So go on Google and look at some hand imagery. That sure looks familiar. Does it not? The long fingers, the eye sockets, the bones. Coins. Don't have time to talk about that. That's another fascinating. When you do a close-up analyzing, so when they ran it through the VP8 machine, they're like, it looks like buttons are on the eyes. Come to find out, some Jewish tombs have coins in the skulls. Why? Because sometimes they put coins over the eyes. The eyes, right? So to keep the eyes, they just put the coin there. And guess what coins they are? Pilot coins that were only minted in the first century between like AD 26 and say AD 31. I can't remember exactly what it was, the dates. So we could do a whole night and talk about the coins. The coins are misspelled. Well, guess what? We found, let's say, 6 other coins that had the same misspelling instead of right? So are there coins in ancient history that are misspelled? Yeah, because, think about it, how many are terrible spellers? So you have people making coins, and so it's not just, so you can't cast it out, oh, it's wrong spelling. Oh, no, we found 6 other ones. So there are not that many pilot coins. Well, that's an interesting thing. By the way, I would not use, so if I'm talking to somebody about the shroud, I'm probably not going to bring this one up. One, I don't know enough about it. What I want them to look at are all the characteristics that are on the shroud. The blood, the image, how in the world did that image get made? So at the end of the night, when I talk about, okay, why do I believe in the resurrection? Because the eyewitness accounts. The eyewitness accounts. But think about it. All 4 Gospels talk about a linen cloth. What happened to it? What happened to it? Is the shroud that's in Turin the burial cloth of Jesus? I don't care what you really think. Because what we think doesn't determine anything. But let me just say this. It is either the authentic cloth or it's not. How many would agree with that? It either is or it isn't. And if you say, Kendall, I'm not convinced of it, you know what? I'm not even going to try and convince you of it. Because I really don't care if you think it's authentic or not. I think it's authentic. And there are skeptics, agnostics, atheists who studied it, went into it. A lot of these guys that went over there, let's go over there, and we won't be there very long. We'll prove it's a fraud, and have been studying it now 40 years and have come to the conclusion. I'd like to see a list of how many. That would be an interesting paper as well. So, all right, I'll open it up for questions, and then we'll close. I did keep it to an hour, so check these out. Okay, check out some of the resources. I'll have Patty put this book in the library back there. You can also get it on Kindle. I enjoy reading books on Kindle, so you can get that one on there. So, and then check out some of the YouTube. I'll send this, if I have your email address when I get home, I'll send out an email. That way you'll have these as hyperlinks. All you got to do is click on the link. All right. Well, any questions? No? Yeah.
The closest thing in modern times, radiation-wise, would probably be like the bombs dropped in Japan, correct?
Right.
So is there any like studies of anything from them eras that they've looked at?
I asked them that question because if you look at the bombs that were dropped in Japan, there are images of people on concrete. Okay. So that's a splitting of an atom. And this is a little bit different, or you wouldn't have a tomb at all, right? And so whatever happened with these neutrons, we're having a transformation of a dead body into now a resurrected body. And even though that is a radiation moment, the way they answered me was, it's not the splitting, or you would not have Israel today, right? And so, yeah, I had the same question, Jeff. Yeah. So those images are completely different. But same question I had. Because my dad saw the largest nuclear detonation, Castle Bravo. And so I emailed this Bob Rucker guy that very question. What about the images that you have on concrete? Have you seen them? Yeah, like if there's something standing here, like if the bomb goes off, it's going to have an image of this stand right on the wall. What created that? The light and the heat created that image. So the radiation was involved in creating this image. It was a split second. Okay, it was a split second radiation moment that created the image. So that's about as far as I can go with it. So I would like to get one of these guys to come and speak. How many think that if we advertised it, I think there's just not enough information out there. We'd have to do a good job on advertising it, but I think we could get a speaker come in and speak maybe on a Friday and a Sunday so we can have them do a more thorough job. Any other thoughts or questions? Yep. I think I probably misspoke, Ruth. I know what you're saying. So when I say they can't reproduce it, what they can reproduce is irradiating those cloths, which push their carbon dating into the future. Another cool thing is they can take coins and flowers and other images and do what's called a corona discharge, the radiation discharge, and guess what happens? It puts images on the cloth, the top of the cloth. So let me clarify. I'm glad you asked that. So this is what's cool. They can take flowers, they can take coins and other things. You're like, really, the radiation through that put an image on the cloth? Yeah, they can do that. Isn't that cool? So yeah, experiments in radiation penetrating the object and then putting the image on the cloth. So therefore, it's more evidence that radiation was the cause of this. So what I meant is they can't reproduce this. They can't take a body and create a 3D image because the image is so, what do I want to say, even on the front side of the image and the back side of the image. What could create that? We can't create that. I mean, there's no, so that's, I'm glad you asked that question. So even though we can't take a body and do that, we can take other objects and irradiate it and create very similar qualities that are on this cloth. Very good question, which helped me clarify what I said earlier. Good thought, yeah. Others? So is this a cool topic or what? I mean, it is the most studied artifact in history with all of these disciplines. Chemistry, botany, nuclear engineering, radiology, and the list goes on. So we shouldn't be afraid to talk about it. Now, I think it would be cool, guys. I want to get your opinion. Are you for a conference at some point? And even though I purchased this one personally, would it be in our, maybe later, to purchase something bigger? If we were going to have a conference, would it be nice? Some of these conference speakers bring their own setup. But, if we had something, whether we keep in here or we could buy one of these for the library. The reason I didn't have the church buy it, because I didn't want to do a presentation and say, what? You had the church buy that when we weren't even in agreement on this whole thing, and so I thought, I'm going to buy it because, honestly, I can't stop looking at it. I mean, if you come up here later and look at that thing, think about this. This is a photograph then. This is an image of a crucified man, the Lord Jesus, who in his resurrection power put an image on the cloth. So, all right, no further comments. Let's pray. Lord, we're thankful that as believers we can investigate these things, study them. Lord, we confess. We believe in the resurrection because your word so clearly teaches it. We have eyewitness accounts. But we thank you that you left a receipt, if you will. You left something, as Russ Breault says, a receipt of the resurrection. You've given us this artifact. And so help us to be able to study it and talk to others about it, but may we make the gospel clear. May we use this, as we've seen, this be used in evangelizing others. And as your people, we should know about it anyway. As skeptics and other friends or family members may ask us about it, at least we have a little more knowledge of it. And we ask you to just to bless the time that we've had together tonight. May it be an encouragement to us to study it even further. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.